The wrench hit the concrete floor with a metallic clang that echoed through the silent garage. What came next would shatter the afternoon peace and force three strangers to choose between silence and action. A little girl, barefoot, her yellow sundress bright against the dusty tarmac, face twisted in raw panic. Her breath came in desperate sobs, terror radiating from every trembling limb. And the words she screamed would unmask a monster hiding behind respectability. "He's almost here," she cried, stumbling toward the nearest figure. "Please, he's coming." But what happened in that garage? Nobody expected three bikers working on chrome and steel to become the only shield between a child and a predator's reach. This is the story of how one desperate girl found exactly the protectors she needed, and how three men proved that heroes don't need badges, just courage. If you believe that real strength means standing up when it matters most, stay with us. Like, comment, and subscribe to Biker Stories, because every view helps spread the message that protection comes in unexpected forms. Route 12, a forgotten repair shop where engines get fixed and travelers rarely linger. The afternoon heat had settled over the garage, leaving only the sound of tools and quiet work. Three men surrounded a Harley in various states of repair. Men whose leather vests told stories most people never bothered to read. Ranger, the leader, years of open road etched into his weathered features, eyes that missed nothing despite the grease-stained hands. Jackson, built like a fortress, tattoos covering arms thick as steel beams, the kind of man whose mere presence commanded attention. And Viper, quiet intensity wrapped in muscle and scars, protective instincts honed by years of watching his brothers' backs. They were brothers of the road's code, men judged by appearance before character, men who lived by principles outsiders dismissed. They had no warning that Pearl, desperate, hunted, alone, would burst through their world and test everything they stood for. Pearl's small hand gripped Ranger's bike like it was the only solid thing left in a world spinning out of control. Her chest still heaved, each breath a ragged pull of air that hurt to hear. Ferguson took a step closer, his voice dripping with practiced patience. "Sweetie, you're scaring these nice people. Let's just get you home to your mother." "My mother's at work." Pearl's voice cut through his like a blade. Small, yes. Trembling, absolutely. But clear. "She works the night shift at County General. You know that because you've been parked outside my house since she left." The air changed. Ranger's eyes narrowed, his body going still in that way men do when violence becomes a possibility. Jackson shifted his weight, casually placing himself between the girl and Ferguson. Viper's thumb hovered over his phone screen. Ferguson's smile never wavered, but something behind his eyes flickered. "Now, that's simply not true. I was helping your neighbors search when someone said they saw a little girl running toward the highway. You're not my neighbor." Pearl's fingers dug into the bike's leather seat. "You don't live on Maple Street. You don't live anywhere near us. And you're lying. Honey, you're confused. Jessica Parker." 2 words. That's all it took. The name hung in the air like a gunshot echo. Viper's head snapped up, his eyes going wide. Ranger's jaw tightened. Even Jackson, who rarely showed anything, went rigid. Pearl's voice dropped to barely above a whisper, but every man heard it. "Jessica Parker, 3rd grade. She disappeared 3 weeks ago walking home from school. They said she ran away, but she didn't. He took her." Her finger, small and dirt-streaked, pointed straight at William Ferguson. "And she's still alive." Ferguson's smile tightened. Just a fraction. Just enough. The mask slipped for half a heartbeat. Something cold and calculating flashing across his features before the concerned neighbor act slammed back into place. But they'd seen it. All 3 of them had seen it. "I remember that case," Viper said slowly, his phone now fully out. "Jessica Parker, 8 years old. Pink backpack with a unicorn on it. They had search parties for a week. Still do," Ranger added, his voice like gravel. "Her face is on every gas station bulletin board from here to the state line." Ferguson laughed, a practiced sound warm and dismissive. "And you think I had something to do with a missing child?" based on the confused ramblings of a frightened little girl. He shook his head, the picture of wounded innocence. Gentlemen, I understand you want to help, but this child needs professional care, not. I saw your car. Pearl's voice grew stronger, steadier. Behind the old Henderson farm. 2 days ago, I was riding my bike on the trail, and I saw it parked behind the barn where nobody goes. She looked up at Ranger, and her eyes held something no 8-year-old should carry, certainty born from seeing something terrible. The back window was open, and I saw a pink backpack. With a unicorn. Silence. The kind of silence that comes right before everything changes. Ferguson's smile was still there, frozen now, like paint cracking on old wood. That's absurd. I don't even know where. Yeah, you do. Jackson's voice was quiet. Deadly quiet. Because she just told us exactly where it is. Ranger stood slowly, unfolding to his full height. His eyes never left Ferguson's face. Nobody's going anywhere. Not until we figure out what's true and what's not. And for the first time since he'd stepped out of that luxury sedan, William Ferguson looked like a man who knew his world was about to collapse. Ferguson's hand moved toward Pearl, reaching out with that same calculated gentleness. Come on now, sweetheart. These men have been very patient, but it's time to. Don't touch her. Ranger's voice wasn't loud. Didn't need to be. Ferguson's hand froze midair, and something in his eyes hardened before the mask slipped back on. I'm simply trying to help a lost child, Ferguson said, his tone shifting. Less warm neighbor, more irritated authority. I don't know what kind of fantasy she's spinning, but I think we've indulged this long enough. Pearl pressed closer to the bike, but her voice didn't waver. There's more. Viper crouched down to her eye level, his phone still in hand. What else did you see, kid? She swallowed hard, gathering courage from somewhere deep. The Henderson farm. The old red barn in the back, the one everyone says is falling apart. His car was parked behind it where you can't see it from the road. I only saw it because I was on the bike trail that cuts through the woods. When was this? Ranger asked. 2 days ago. Tuesday afternoon. Pearl's small hands trembled, but she kept going. I almost didn't notice, but the sun was hitting the back window just right, and I saw it, the pink backpack with the unicorn. The same one Jessica had in all the missing posters. Ferguson laughed, but it came out wrong, too sharp, too quick. This is absurd. A child sees a pink backpack and suddenly I'm a criminal? Half the kids in this county have pink backpacks. With a unicorn that has a rainbow mane and one broken horn? Pearl's voice cut through his. The left horn. It broke off last year when Jessica dropped it on the playground. She cried about it, but her mom said they couldn't afford a new one yet. The silence that followed was heavy enough to crush stone. Viper's fingers were already moving across his phone screen, pulling up news articles. His face went pale. She's right. The missing person report specifically mentions the broken horn. Left side. They included it because it made the backpack identifiable. Ferguson's composure cracked wider. I want to leave. Now. This is harassment. And I will not. There's someone else who saw him. Pearl's words stopped Ferguson cold. Martha, the crossing guard at Lincoln Elementary. She saw him. Saw me what? Ferguson snapped, his smooth voice finally showing edges. Following me. Pearl's eyes filled with tears, but she didn't look away. She saw you in your car, parked across from the school 3 different times last week. Once when Mom picked me up late. Twice when I walked home alone. Her voice broke, just slightly. I asked her why she didn't tell anyone. She said nobody would believe her over someone like you. Someone important. The words landed like stones in deep water. Ranger's jaw tightened. He'd heard that story before. Different players, same ending. Good people staying quiet because monsters wore suits and smiled at church on Sundays. Not today. Jackson, Ranger said, his voice calm and final. Block his car. Jackson moved without hesitation, his massive frame crossing the parking lot in 4 long strides. He positioned himself directly in front of Ferguson's luxury sedan, arms folded across his chest like a wall made of muscle and bad intentions. "Viper, call the sheriff. Tell them we've got a situation that needs sorting." Viper's phone was already at his ear. Ferguson's face transformed. The concerned neighbor vanished completely, replaced by something cold and calculating. "You have no authority to detain me. I'm leaving, and if you try to stop me, I'll have you all arrested for assault and kidnapping." Ranger stepped forward, close enough that Ferguson had to look up to meet his eyes. "Nobody's detaining you. We're just asking you to wait while the sheriff comes down and clears this all up. If you've got nothing to hide, shouldn't take long." He leaned in, his voice dropping to barely above a whisper. "But if you try to leave before he gets here, that tells us everything we need to know." Ferguson's hands clenched into fists at his sides. For the first time since he'd arrived, the mask was completely gone. And what stood in its place was something that made Pearl press back against the bike, her instincts screaming what her young mind had known all along. This was a man who hurt children, and now he was trapped. The sheriff's cruiser pulled into the rest stop with lights but no sirens. A deliberate choice that said this might be nothing, might be something, let's not panic anyone yet. Sheriff Clayton stepped out, adjusting his belt, his weathered face showing the kind of tired that came from 20 years of dealing with small-town problems. He took one look at the scene. 3 bikers, a little girl, and William Ferguson, and his expression shifted to something between confusion and annoyance. "William." Clayton's tone was already defensive, already protective. "What's going on here?" Ferguson's transformation was instant. The cold calculation vanished, replaced by the warm, concerned citizen who donated to the sheriff's re-election campaign. "Jim, thank God. These men have been detaining me for the last 15 minutes based on some confused statements from this poor child." He gestured toward Pearl like she was evidence of his patience. "I was helping search for her when she ran onto the highway. I tried to help, and now they're accusing me of—" He shook his head, the picture of wounded dignity. "It's absurd." Sheriff Clayton's eyes moved to Ranger. "That true? You've been holding him here." "We asked him to wait while we called you," Ranger said evenly. "Girl came running out of the woods scared out of her mind. Says he's been following her. Says he took Jessica Parker." Clayton's expression tightened at the name, but when he looked at Ferguson, there was doubt in his eyes. The kind of doubt that came from knowing someone, trusting them. "William sits on the school board, son. He's a property developer, runs half the commercial real estate in this county. You're telling me he—" "I saw him." Pearl's voice was small but clear. "At my school. In his car. Watching." Clayton crouched down, his tone gentle but patronizing. "Sweetheart, Mr. Ferguson does a lot of work with the schools. He's probably there for meetings. 3 times last week," Pearl continued. "After school. When the meetings are over. Just sitting there, watching kids leave." "I'm on the board," Ferguson interjected smoothly. "Of course I'm at the school frequently. This child has clearly confused routine oversight with something sinister." Clayton stood, and Ranger could see it. The sheriff was already choosing sides, already protecting the pillar of the community over the word of a scared kid and 3 strangers in leather vests. Then Viper's phone rang. "Yeah." He listened, his expression shifting. "You sure? Okay. Bring her down. Now." He looked at Clayton. "That was Deputy Mills. She's bringing Martha Hernandez, the crossing guard from Lincoln Elementary." Ferguson's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "I don't see how that's—" "Martha saw him," Pearl said quietly. "She told me she did, but she said nobody would believe her." 10 minutes later, a second cruiser arrived. Martha Hernandez stepped out, a small woman in her 60s, wearing a bright orange safety vest even though her shift had ended hours ago. Her hands shook. Clayton approached her with the same gentle authority. "Martha, these folks say you saw something. Something involving William Ferguson and this little girl." Martha's eyes went to Ferguson, to his expensive clothes, his confident posture, his cold stare that said, "Choose carefully." Then she looked at Pearl, at the dirt on her face, the torn yellow dress, the bare, bleeding feet. and something broke. I saw him. Martha's voice cracked. Last Tuesday, and Wednesday, and Friday, parked across from the school in his silver sedan. Watching the kids leave. Her eyes filled with tears. Watching her. Ferguson's voice was ice. Martha, you're making a serious accusation. I saw you follow her. The words burst out like they'd been trapped too long. When her mother was late picking her up, you pulled out after she started walking. Drove slow behind her for 3 blocks before she choked on a sob. Before I called out to her and made her wait with me. Clayton's expression changed. Why didn't you report this? Martha looked at Ferguson, at his $1,000 watch, his political connections, his power. Because who would believe me over him? A crossing guard over a school board member. She turned to Pearl, tears streaming. I'm so sorry, baby. I should have said something. I should have. The Henderson farm, Clayton said quietly, looking at Ferguson now with different eyes. You own that property, don't you, William? The mask didn't crack this time. It shattered. Ferguson's face went blank, expressionless. The concerned citizen was gone. What remained was something that made even Clayton take a step back. I want my lawyer. And in those 4 words, everyone knew Pearl had been telling the truth. The words hung in the air like a confession written in blood. I want my lawyer. Sheriff Clayton's hand moved to his radio, his voice steady but tight. Deputy Mills, I need you to contact Judge Morrison. We're going to need a warrant for the Henderson property. All structures. Immediately. Ferguson's eyes darted between the sheriff, the bikers, and his car where Jackson still stood like an immovable mountain. The calculated calm was gone, replaced by something frantic. Caged. You can't do this, Ferguson said, his voice rising. I know my rights. You have no probable cause. A credible witness and a missing child's identifiable property on your land? Clayton's tone had transformed completely. The friendly deference was dead. That's plenty of cause, William. More than enough. Ferguson took a step toward his car. I'm leaving. You can serve your warrant when you get it. But I'm not staying here to be harassed by... Jackson didn't move, didn't speak, just stood there, arms crossed, a wall of leather and muscle blocking the sedan. Get out of my way. Ferguson's voice cracked with barely contained rage. Jackson's response was a slight shake of his head. Nope. I said move. Ferguson's composure shattered like glass. He rushed at Jackson, shoving against the bigger man's chest with both hands. It was like pushing a brick building. Jackson didn't even rock backward. Sir, you need to calm down, Clayton warned, his hand moving toward his belt. You're making this worse. Worse. Ferguson spun on him, and the mask was completely gone now. The respected businessman, the concerned citizen, the pillar of the community. All of it evaporated, leaving something raw and ugly underneath. You think this can get worse? Do you have any idea what you're doing? Who I am? Yeah, Ranger said quietly. We do. Now. Ferguson's eyes went wild, scanning for an exit, a solution, anything. They landed on Pearl, still standing near Ranger's bike, small and vulnerable, and the reason his carefully constructed world was collapsing. Something in his expression changed. You! The word came out like poison. Pearl took a step back, instinct screaming danger. You stupid little girl. Ferguson's voice dropped to a snarl. You've ruined everything. He lunged, not toward his car, not toward escape, toward Pearl. Hands reaching, face twisted with rage, all pretense of humanity stripped away. Viper moved first, yanking Pearl backward so hard she nearly fell, putting his body between her and Ferguson. But Ranger was faster. He hit Ferguson like a freight train, driving him sideways and down. They crashed into the gravel, Ferguson's expensive polo shirt tearing as he hit the ground. Ranger's weight pinned him flat, one knee pressed into his back, hands securing his wrists with the kind of precision that said this wasn't his first time restraining someone. Ferguson thrashed, screaming, the words pouring out in a stream of incoherent rage. She had no right. No right to. They were supposed to. Stop talking. Ranger's voice was cold steel. "Every word you say is digging your grave deeper." Jackson moved in, adding his weight to keep Ferguson down. The man beneath them bucked and twisted, but it was useless. Two men who'd spent decades on the road, who'd handled bar fights and worse, weren't about to let some predator in khakis break free. Clayton was on his radio now, calling for backup, for an ambulance for Pearl's bleeding feet, for every resource he could muster. His voice shook, not from fear, but from rage at how close this had been. How close he'd been to letting Ferguson walk. Martha had collapsed onto a nearby curb, sobbing into her hands. And Pearl stood behind Viper, her small hand gripping the back of his vest, watching as the monster who'd haunted her nightmares lay face down in the dirt, held there by men who'd believed her when everyone else would have looked away. "You're done," Ranger said quietly. His voice meant only for Ferguson. "Whatever you've been doing, whoever else you've hurt, it's over." Ferguson's response was a sound somewhere between a laugh and a sob. "You have no idea. No idea what you've—" "Save it for your lawyer," Clayton said, pulling out handcuffs. "William Ferguson, you're under arrest for attempted assault. And depending on what we find at that farm, a whole lot more." As the metal cuffs clicked shut, Pearl finally let herself cry. Not from fear this time, but from the overwhelming relief of being believed, of being safe. The call came through Sheriff Clayton's radio 47 minutes after Ferguson was cuffed and placed in the back of a cruiser. "Sheriff, you need to get to the Henderson property. Now." Clayton's face went pale. He looked at Ranger, then at Pearl sitting wrapped in a deputy's jacket on the tailgate of a pickup truck. "Stay with her," he said, then ran for his vehicle. The bikers stayed. Not because they were asked, because that's what you did when a kid needed to know she wasn't alone. 23 minutes later, Clayton's voice crackled through the radio. Deputy Mills had left on the hood of her cruiser. What came through made everyone within earshot stop breathing. "We found her. Jessica Parker. She's alive." Pearl's head snapped up, tears streaming down her face. "She's alive. She's alive," Viper confirmed, his own voice rough with emotion he didn't bother hiding. The details came in fragments over the next hour. Deputies had found the hidden basement behind a false wall in the old barn, exactly where Pearl had seen Ferguson's car parked. Jessica Parker, 8 years old, dehydrated and terrified but breathing. Alive. 3 weeks in darkness because a monster in expensive clothes thought he could play God with children's lives. The paramedics rushed her to County General. Her parents, who'd spent 21 days in a hell no parent should know, were already on their way. But the search didn't stop there. In that basement, investigators found more than just Jessica. They found lists, schedules, photographs of children walking home from school, playing in parks, waiting at bus stops. All from single-parent homes. All with working mothers who couldn't be everywhere at once. Ferguson had been methodical, patient, hunting the most vulnerable because he knew they were the easiest to take and the hardest to believe. For names emerged from the evidence. For other children who'd disappeared over the past 7 years. Cases that had gone cold because there was no evidence, no witnesses, no proof. Until now. By the time full dark settled over the rest stop, the scene had transformed into a command center, cruisers, crime scene vans, FBI on their way from 3 states over. What had started as a scared little girl running from the woods had become the break in a case that spanned nearly a decade. And through it all, 3 bikers sat on their motorcycles, drinking gas station coffee, making sure Pearl wasn't alone. The headlights that swept into the parking lot just after 9 o'clock belonged to a sedan that barely stopped before the driver's door flew open. Pearl's mother, still wearing her hospital scrubs, mascara streaked down her face, ran like her life depended on reaching her daughter. She collapsed to her knees in front of the pickup truck, pulling Pearl into her arms with the kind of desperate strength that came from almost losing everything. "Baby. Oh God. Baby, I'm here. I'm here." Pearl buried her face in her mother's shoulder, and the sobs that came were the kind that cleanse. The kind that wash away the terror and leave room for healing. Her mother looked up, her eyes finding Ranger first, then Jackson, then Viper. Her face was destroyed with tears, but her voice came clear. "Thank you." She choked on the words. "Thank you for believing her. Thank you for staying. Thank you for—" She couldn't finish. Didn't need to. Ranger stepped forward, crouching down to their level. "She saved herself, ma'am. And she saved Jessica Parker. And for other kids who might still be out there." He glanced at Pearl, and something like respect, real earned respect, passed between them. "Your daughter's got more courage than most grown men I know." Pearl's mother pulled her daughter closer, pressing kisses to her forehead, her hair, her tear-stained cheeks. "I'm so sorry I wasn't there. I'm so sorry you had to be so brave alone." Pearl pulled back just enough to look at her mother. "I wasn't alone, Mom. They stayed." She looked at the three bikers, these strangers who'd become guardians, who'd put themselves between a child and a monster without hesitation, who'd believed a little girl's word over a respected man's lies. They stayed. And in that moment, three men who'd spent their lives on the margins of society, judged by their appearance and their choices, knew exactly why they rode. Not for the freedom, not for the brotherhood, for moments exactly like this. 3 months later, a package arrived at the Iron Brotherhood clubhouse on a Tuesday morning when the autumn air had just started to bite. Ranger found it on the picnic table outside, wrapped in brown paper with his name written in careful, childish handwriting. No return address. Just 3 words in the corner. "To my heroes." Inside the paper was a frame. Simple wood, nothing fancy. But what it held made Ranger's weathered hands go still. A photograph. Pearl stood on a stage in what looked like a school gymnasium, wearing a yellow dress, new, clean, whole. Her hair was brushed and tied back with a ribbon. Her feet, once bloody and bare, wore bright sneakers. And her smile, God, her smile, was the kind that said the nightmares were fading. She held a certificate in both hands, the words "Certificate of Bravery" visible even in the photo. Around her stood people in suits, probably the mayor, school officials, people who loved ceremonies and speeches. But Pearl wasn't looking at them. She was looking at the camera, looking forward, strong. Behind the photo was a piece of notebook paper, folded once. The handwriting was the same, careful, practiced, each letter formed with the concentration only a child learning cursive could manage. "Dear Ranger, Jackson, and Viper, my mom helped me find your address. I hope that's okay. They gave me this certificate at a community safety assembly. The mayor said I was brave for speaking up. My teacher said I helped save lives. But I wanted you to know something. I wasn't brave until you believed me. Jessica is home now. She's in counseling, and her mom says she has hard days, but she's home. They found for other kids because of what we did. 2 of them were alive. 2 families got to bury their babies and finally have answers. The other 2 families got their children back. That's 6 kids total if you count me. 6 kids who are safe because 3 bikers at a rest stop decided that looking away wasn't an option. My mom says you probably saved my life. She cries every time she talks about it. Happy crying, she says. The kind that happens when you realize how close you came to losing everything. Mr. Ferguson is in prison. They say he'll never get out. Martha, the crossing guard, visits us sometimes. She still feels guilty, but I told her the same thing I'm telling you. We can only be as brave as the moment lets us. That day, you gave me a moment to be brave. Thank you for believing a scared little girl when everyone else would have looked away. Thank you for staying. Thank you for being the kind of strong that protects instead of hurts. I'm going to be okay. We all are. Because of you. Love, Pearl. I'm learning to ride a bike without being scared now. Mom says maybe when I'm older I can learn to ride a motorcycle. I told her I want one just like Ranger's. Ranger read the letter twice, then folded it carefully and placed it back behind the photo. By the time Jackson and Viper rolled up an hour later, he had the frame propped against the clubhouse window where the morning light hit it just right. That the kid? Jackson asked, studying the photo. Yeah. Viper read the letter over Ranger's shoulder, and when he was done, he didn't say anything. Didn't need to. They stood there, 3 men who'd seen too much road and not enough kindness, looking at the proof that sometimes, just sometimes, being in the right place at the right moment was enough to change everything. We heading out today? Viper finally asked. Ranger looked at Pearl's smiling face one more time, then nodded. Yeah, sun's up. Road's calling. They mounted their bikes as dawn broke fully over the clubhouse, engines rumbling to life like thunder given purpose. 3 men in leather vests, judged by strangers, misunderstood by society, but guided by a code simpler than most people could comprehend. Protect the vulnerable. Stand your ground. Never look away, because somewhere down that endless highway, another scared voice might cry out. And when it did, they'd be there. They always would be. The Iron Brotherhood rode into the sunrise, knowing that the road never ended. But neither did their promise. And that was enough. Pearl's story isn't just about 3 bikers and 1 brave little girl. It's about the choice we all face when something feels wrong. Do we look away, or do we stand our ground? If you believe in trusting your instincts, in giving children the voice they deserve, and in the power of standing between innocence and evil, then show your support. Hit that like button, drop a comment, and subscribe to Biker Stories. Share this video with someone who needs to be reminded that heroes don't always wear badges. Sometimes they wear leather and ride steel. Drop a comment and tell us where you're watching from today. Pearl's story proves that courage isn't about size or age. It's about speaking up when everything inside you screams to stay silent. Sometimes the smallest voices carry the most powerful truths. Have you ever trusted your gut when everyone else dismissed you? Have you ever stood your ground when walking away would have been easier? Share your story in the comments. Your experience might give someone else the courage to act when it matters most. This story reminds us that predators rely on silence, respectability, and people looking the other way. But when anyone, chooses to believe, to listen, to stand between a child and danger, everything changes. Hit subscribe and join a community that believes in protecting the vulnerable, no matter what. Because the road is long, and somewhere out there, someone needs you to stay.